people are going to fall for deepfakes over and over again. No matter how advanced your technical defenses are, or how much education that you provide to your people in the company, I guarantee that they will happen again. It's a never-ending war. So where do you start?
In the age of deepfakes, anyone can clone a voice, fake a face, and produce content to sound exactly like someone you trust. Even me. That was an AI version of my voice, and if it sounded convincing, you've already understood the problem. Deepfakes are no longer just a Hollywood issue. They're cheap, fast, and accessible. Recently, a fake news report went viral featuring finance expert Alan Kohler and Commonwealth Bank CEO Matt Comyn. It looked like the ABC, it sounded like the ABC, but it was a scam designed to steal your trust and your money. So we're in an age where you can't believe your own eyes and ears. How does a business prove it's the real thing? I'm Dr. Juliette Burke, Adjunct Professor at UNSW School of Management and Governance, and this is The Business Of, a podcast by the UNSW Business School. Associate Professor Eric Lim, founder of the UNSW Crypto Economy Lab, says he has the answer. Eric, let's start at the beginning. What exactly is a deepfake?
Deepfake essentially is the use of AI technology, or actually kind of like the innovative technologies that we see these days, to create fake realities. It could be a video, it could be an image that has been doctored, and so on and so forth, with some intentions behind it, whether is it for entertainment, or it could be simply that people have certain malicious intent for why they created those deepfakes and try to disseminate them.
When I think about deepfake, I think about it in the digital world. But then I think about paintings. And there's always been master fakers. How is it any different today?
So you're right, conceptually they are the same, right? But people are concerned with the velocity by which these fakes evolve. And also they are concerned with the ease with which these fakes appear and are created. I think these are the two main factors that people are worried about, rather than the existence of fakes, which has always been there. There is easy access to all these tools that are out there. You can easily just pay a subscription of $20 and create a fake of a brand, of a company doing something that is damaging to itself, or create a persona that is related to a company. So the ease with which these fakes are created is probably causing a lot of disturbance in the minds of businesses.
So it's just the pervasiveness of the technology that's the threat? But what are the actors behind it wanting to do?
My assumption is that they are predominantly divided into two intentions, right? One intention is that it could be entertaining. That means basically I think that this is something funny. I want to put it out on the social media and cause people to laugh at it. The other dimension of it is malicious, in a sense that it could be that they could gain from the creation of the deepfakes. Recently, there was a story of ABC where Alan Kohler and Matt Comyn, CBA's CEO, were having a fight in the studio. And when Matt was called out for having a secret investment platform or something. So I believe that that was intentionally malicious, in a sense that people who created that deepfake was probably trying to benefit from it by driving traffic to that fake investment platform that Matt supposedly was investing in.
So there's this moment that we're in with AI-generated clutter. And I guess the question is, how do brands demonstrate their credibility, their authenticity, when there's the chance that you're actually looking at a deep fake?
This is a good question, isn't it? In a sense that how do you defend against deep fakes that are trying to damage a company's reputation? or even a personal reputation if you have one that you want to protect. Ultimately, I think it comes down to your track record, your reputation, in a sense, how resilient your reputation is. If you demonstrate, if as an individual, you demonstrate that you are a trustworthy person, that means you go about your life, and when you're not perfect, no one is perfect, right? You carry out your actions, and if you get something wrong, you correct yourself, you admit your mistakes, and so on and so forth. People are more willing to trust you. But if you're someone on the contrary, when you're caught out in misbehaving or in a mistake, and you just kind of like double down and just said, I wasn't wrong, people are less likely to believe that. So if I could bring in a little personal example, my grandfather is 106 years old, actually. I think he's an example. He leads his life well. His countless children, countless grandchildren. And I admire him. And if he did something wrong, I'm sure that his reputation will survive because he's simply a great man.
Do you want to talk about examples in the physical world where someone has had a threat to their reputation and they've been able to get around it or maybe even come out looking good?
I'm not sure if you remember the case of Johnson & Johnson where, they pulled all their Tylenols off the shelves because there were a few cases where the Tylenol has been tampered with and people who have bought them died from that poisoning. So it was a deliberate sabotage event. And Johnson & Johnson was seen as decisive. They were seen as being more concerned with the lives and the safety of their customers than profit, in the sense that they're willing to take a hit by pulling everything off the shelves at a moment's notice. So I think that gained them a huge, formidable, resilient reputation after that event.
And how does that help us know as business leaders how to deal with a deepfake threat?
So if I'm going to relate that to deepfakes, I would say that if you are a company today in the environment where deepfakes are so prevalent, you might want to act in good faith, right? You want to be a moral character in society and to be judged by your actions, to garner a good track record of all the things that you do and the things that you say, and that will build you resilience. And then, that will protect you against unforeseen circumstances in the future. It could be from deepfakes, it could be from other things.
If I think back to deepfakes, is the link that when a deepfake happens, a consumer looks at that one instance in the context of longevity and says, actually, that's unusual. That can't be right.
That's right.
It can't be that Matt Common threw a glass of water in someone's face. That's just not the kind of thing.
Out of character.
Out of character.
That's
and
right.
Is that what we rely upon now?
Yes. Not simply because of the fact, it's good to protect your own reputation or understand the importance of protecting a company's reputation or brand in for that sense. But simply because of the fact that everything starts from the individual. If you want a company to have resilient brands, resilient reputation, you need to have good people in it, people with good character.
So I hear what you're saying about we follow individuals and we follow their reputation. What happens? I see all these Hollywood influencers, Hollywood actors and actresses, and then there's a threat to that reputation, perhaps through a deepfake. How do I make sense of that?
Yeah, Hollywood is a very interesting area, right? In the sense that the stars have their own personal brands. In fact, they are like a company by themselves. So in that sense, they have all the incentives to actually protect their own reputation. But sadly, it seems like there's a lot of glitz in Hollywood, but not a lot of wisdom. You can see a lot of Hollywood stars just self-destruct, right? By doing very silly things over and over again, to the point where, they become a toxic asset and no one wants to touch them. All the Hollywood studios just avoid them. Whereas you get stars that have staying power. You get stars like Keanu Reeves, whom I think has a great reputation. Like he seems like a down-to-earth person. He doesn't seem to be trying too hard to fake it. But again, I would say that has to be coupled with your own personal understanding of what authenticity means.
So the Italian Prime Minister recently had a deep fake made about her. And of course, there were some people who bought into that. But her strategy was actually to publicise that it was a deep fake and to put it up on X and say, this is what happens to people. This is not me. So to kind of own it and challenge it in her own right. What do you think about that as a strategy?
Well, it really depends, right? I mean, if she already had a stellar reputation or has a track record, then by coming out to own it and to say that I have nothing to hide, or go check it out, I think that's brilliant, right? But if you already have a solid reputation and you put it out there, it's just kind of like drawing more attention to yourself, and people are more likely to believe that than not believe it. I mean, that's kind of how I see it logically.
Let's take it back then to business. And I'm thinking about business owners who have a brand and they want to protect it. Are there layers of defense that they have to put in place to make sure they're not attacked by deepfake?
I never believed that the defense against deepfakes is going to be a singular solution. Can't be, right? It has to be multifaceted. So in a way, we could have technological solutions, or at least technological defense, where you can have AI calculating the probability that something is fake and so on and so forth. And you can have blockchain technologies that check for the provenance of the information, in the sense that if something that is said by a politician has to be verified, we can all trace back to the provenance of that information. And then, of course, you can have, like I said, a great track record. So it's multifaceted, right? You can have technological solutions, then you can have social, and you can have individual defenses against deepfakes. So it can't just be one particular solution. We can all learn from the examples that we have had with trying to protect against cybersecurity. You see technological solutions and so on and so forth, but it still happens. No matter how advanced your technical defenses are, or how much education that you provide to your people in the company, I guarantee that they will happen again. So same thing, deepfakes, it's a never-ending war. So where do you start? That's why my proposal is you start with the individual, because that's the only defense that you can control.
Eric, your research is looking at solutions through decentralized ID, which sounds like a verification badge for a brand. Can you explain how that works?
Well, the concept of decentralized identity is that you want everyone, right? Every entity. So it could be an individual, it could be a company, it could be a government institutions, to have a ID on a blockchain that they can control. And in a sense that you can issue statements, you can issue content, and kind of like tie that content back to your ID on the blockchain, such that everybody can verify the provenance of that content and whether that content has been tampered with or not. So that's the technological solution. There's one technological solution that we have explored, but that is mainly for the verification of the provenance of that information. So it's not like a centralized platform like Facebook or X, where, let's say, if you go against certain regulations or certain company policy, they can delete the content, or they can, shadow ban your content and so on and so forth. So imagine if you have a presence in those platforms and you have made a name for yourself, you have created this brand for yourself, and suddenly you're shut down. Your whole livelihood is gone. So that's the danger of a centralized platform, where a decentralized platform, no one can really shut you down.
So Edelman's Trust Barometer is this yearly index which basically looks at who we trust. And we used to trust institutions and leaders, but it seems that today we're trusting influencers. These are people whom we don't know, but they've got a following. Does that make us more susceptible to deepfakes?
I don't think so. I think the turning to influencers is actually a response to the failing of our institutions, our politicians. We just feel that we can't trust them anymore. I think the reason why deepfakes are so prevalent and so threatening is because we have lost that character, that ability to say that there are wrong things in the world and there are right things in the world. And there are authentic things in the world where you feel in your bones that it's right. This is correct, this is true, and this is not right, this is wrong, right? I mean, if we bring that back, then we can alleviate the effects or the detrimental effects of this deepfakes. People are less likely to fall for it. There are, like I said, digital solutions, AI fighting AI in a sense that AI calculating the probability that this particular digital artifact is actually fake or not fake. But again, they were ever going to be able to calculate the probability. They can't tell for certainty anyway. But like I said, that's just one aspect of how you can defend yourself against deepfakes. But the most important aspect of it, I feel, comes from the individual.
And what do you think the future looks like then in terms of deepfake? What's the next iteration of what we're in now if we're in a problematic context?
Try to draw lessons from, like I said earlier, about cybersecurity. I mean, we've been talking about cybersecurity for years. It's not a new phenomenon, right? We keep saying that, okay, we're going to have a new detection tool. If you apply that to the same context of deepfakes, it's the same narrative. We say that there's deepfakes, there's a threat from deepfakes, and then we have all these technological defenses against it, or we can actually educate people against looking out for telltale signs where this is a deepfake. We can educate people better. Now, if you think about it, that is exactly the same narrative as we have for the cybersecurity defense. We say that we can have technological solutions, we can have trainings, and so on and so forth. But why do cybersecurity breaches still happen? Are they not good enough? Obviously, they're not good enough. That's why it happens. So, same thing with deepfakes. People are going to fall for deepfakes over and over again. I can almost guarantee it. That's how I see it.
I love that you've got this philosophical take on things, which is that the answer is not digital. The answer is to go back and reflect on ourselves. How have we lost the ability to determine authenticity from inauthenticity? That's your basic thesis.
That's my basic thesis, in a sense that when you're authentic yourself, I'm not saying that you're going to get it right, but at least it increases your probability of getting it right. That's what I'm saying.
So what do you think a business leader needs to do to protect themselves then from deepfakes, which, as I understand it, are going to keep on happening?
Yeah, deepfakes are going to keep happening. But I think the best line of defense is to inculcate a deep, authentic foundation in the individual, be it the leader of the company or people within the company. Once you have that firm foundation, you're going to realize that you can detect deepfakes better. Not 100%, but you can do it better.
That's Associate Professor Eric Lim from UNSW's Business School. If you want to understand what happens when AI sets the price you pay, listen to our episode with UNSW Associate Professor Sam Kirshner.
Why we feel very unfair, if you look at the kind of dynamic pricing example from the airlines, is that it is just so opaque in terms of what are they actually using to sell me this flight at this price. So what is it that's in my cookies or my browsing behavior or just the country or city that I'm in that is determining this price?
You'll find the link in the episode description. The Business of is brought to you by the UNSW Business School, produced with Dead Set Studios.